Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And no, it is not another episode of the City Project. That is now gone from my workshop. The space is now open for a brand new project, and this railroad is going to be a lot smaller than the last one. It's a little more than 100 square feet, and it is in O scale. Well, actually ON30, but it does include a small standard gauge interchange with just a single standard gauge turnout. This project, which shall henceforth be known as the Copper and Woodchute Mountain, is actually the client's third railroad by this name. He built the other two himself, but he's now starting to get on in years, and he wants me to give him a head start in getting this one built. I initially designed it some time ago, and I presented that earlier design in a previous video. I will put a link to that in the description below. But before we start actually building, it's a good opportunity to revisit that design and see if we can improve it. If you're watching when I did the original design for this railroad a couple of years ago, you may remember this drawing. This is the final form of the plan that I did back then. In the 2 years or so that the client has been waiting for me to start this project, he has moved house and he now has final dimensions for the site. You may recall from before that the idea was to stick within a 10-foot length so that it can be placed across the end of a spare bedroom when the client moves into his new home. Well, in the time that has passed since then, the client has now moved into his new home, and the bedroom is slightly narrower than we thought it was going to be, and it does not quite fit across the end. Here is the old Benchwork footprint superimposed on a scale drawing of the new room. It doesn't quite fit across the end. We would need to shorten it by about 4 inches, which is not the end of the world, but it would waste a lot of space because the new room is actually somewhat larger than he was anticipating, just a slightly different shape. So we decided it was best to completely redesign the railroad and expand it to fit the new site, and also at the same time improving some of the things which were restricted on the previous design. Here is a quick sketch that I drew with the client in my office when he came to visit and drop off some supplies. The room walls are not drawn properly, they're just basic rectangles just to get the right dimensions. And I've simply cut apart the previous design and placed it in the space, modifying it as necessary. Now it looks like we might be able to get some kind of limited staging area in the closet. Although this first version neither of us are very happy with, we thought it probably better to put the staging tracks on the outside. Here is the next variation that I drew, and the staging tracks can indeed be a little bit longer. Now the client does not want to cut through the wall at this point, otherwise we can make them longer still. But after he went home and I got to thinking about this design in my own time, I thought that we might be able to get a better version of it by starting with the mirror image of the plan. So that's what I did. In this version I have completely redrawn it, rather than trying to recycle the plan elements that were here before. And by coming into the staging area from the other end, we can now use the full length of the closet, and it makes much better space for the room. We can also get the interchange point along the long wall and curve the secondary switching area through the short side. The mine spur does have to be shortened somewhat, so there isn't as much room for elevation change as we previously had, but that is the only downside. Everything else is a whole lot better than the previous version. The client particularly liked that he can now run longer trains than he could have done before. There's still a lot of things that are not right about this plan, and I still need to tweak a lot of areas. Here is the next version I drew with all his structures positioned. Now in most cases I already have the structures in my possession. I mentioned earlier that the client came to visit and drop off things at the same time. I'm still not happy about the arrangement of the interchange, and at this point the track spacings of the standard and narrow gauge are slightly too close together. Here I've stretched them 1 inch. I've switched the standard gauge turnout for a right-hander, which means that the main line can now run through the straight route, and this whole interchange area works a whole lot better. Also in the last couple of versions I've skewed the front of the benchwork on this side of the room to allow better access into the staging tracks in the closet. On this version I have enlarged the staging area I found there was room for a third track and also a short locomotive spur. There's no need for a turntable. The client is just going to run his locomotives backwards. And here is another view with most of the scenery shown. I haven't bothered to draw in and colour all the landscape because we felt that would just be a waste of time. The client already knows what the layout's going to look like. I just found another version of this drawing, this one with the town names and the railroad name. So I thought I'd show you that one. And I just realised I haven't talked anything about how this railroad is going to be operated. The plan is that we start from staging. We run through Laconia to Jerome Junction and back again, ignoring the continuous run. But because everything is so close together, the intention is to start by coming out of staging, running an entire lap of the railroad and calling at Laconia on the second lap, and then continuing once again running one full lap of the room before calling at the terminus at Jerome Junction on the second time. And that should hopefully give a reasonable length run for his trains. And as the title implies, this will actually be the client's third version of his copper and Woodchute mountain railroad. And finally, here is an exploded benchwork drawing. This is something that I always do before I start building a railroad. I work out exactly where it's going to be split and work out how to frame the benchwork with most of the key dimensions shown. There's a few dimensions I haven't included, namely this area with the drop flap and the cantilever that meets it. Those I'm just going to frame up in situ once I've got the rest of it built. Well, that's all I'm going to say about this project for the time being. Next week I'm going to start building it. Actually, I've already started building it, but for next week's video I will show you the first instalment of the construction of it. So I hope to see you back here for that. Until then, thanks for watching and bye for now.